Every settler in Haywood County was in a hurry to finish their cabin roofs before the first frost of fall. But 17-year-old Elijah Thorne was building a second roof right over his first. His neighbors said it was crazy and wasteful. They told him he was stupid. Young Thorne built an outer roof frame that was exactly 14 inches above his main cedar shingle roof. This made a hollow air gap that didn't seem to have any use. He used 60% more wood than he needed, which made the structure heavier and went against all the rules for building efficiently in the mountains. Marcus Hicks, the settlement's most experienced builder, who had built 52 cabins in 4 counties, laughed out loud as he watched Elijah work. "One roof keeps the rain out, boy. When snow piles up, 2 roofs just means twice the weight that will cause them to fall." Thomas Whitmore, the area surveyor and expert on building in the mountains, called it orphan foolishness, saying it was the desperate work of a boy who had no older people to teach him how to do things right. Then came the day of February 3, 1894. The great Appalachian blizzard came down from the Ohio Valley with winds over 90 miles per hour and temperatures that dropped to 34 degrees below zero. The deadly storm that would kill 58 people across the Blue Ridge and bury towns under 11 feet of snow for 21 days straight. Snow loads caused standard cabin roofs to fall. They were never meant to hold up because they were made of only one layer. Families froze when their shelters fell apart in the middle of the night. Rise lost his entire winter food supply when his roof caved inward on the 4th day. But Elijah Thorne's strange double-roof cabin, it stood untouched while destruction raged around it, its interior holding steady at 52 degrees while neighbors died in the frozen darkness. What did this mountain boy understand about air gaps and thermal dynamics that experienced frontier builders had completely missed? If you value stories of practical wisdom that stood the test of time, make sure to subscribe. We've got more documented accounts worth remembering. Elijah Thorne stood on his completed cabin roof in the September sunshine, measuring cords stretched between wooden stakes driven into the cedar shingles at precise 4-foot intervals. The hemp rope marked a grid pattern across the entire roof surface, outlining where a second layer of structure would rise above the first behind him. The sound of Marcus Hicks's axe stopped mid-swing. Hicks had been splitting firewood for winter storage, but disbelief pulled him toward the Thorne boy's peculiar construction site. "Elijah, that's the damnedest thing I've seen in 27 years of mountain building," Hicks called out, setting down his axe and wiping sawdust from his beard. "Your roof's already finished properly. Tight shingles, good pitch, drains water fine. What in God's name are you building on top of it?" Hicks had spent nearly 3 decades constructing cabins across the Appalachian frontier, and he'd never seen anyone add a structure above a completed roof. The boy wasn't even 18 yet, orphaned 2 years prior when a logging accident took his father after fever had already claimed his mother. The community had expected young Elijah to fail, to sell his 40 acres and seek work in town. Instead, the boy had built a cabin that matched any in the settlement. And now he was doing something nobody could explain. Elijah didn't look up from his measurements, his calloused hands adjusting the cord until it formed a perfect rectangle 14 in above the existing roof surface. "My grandfather wrote about this in his journals," he replied quietly. "Called it a breathing roof. The old mountain people in Switzerland said it was built this way for 1,000 years. Air between 2 roofs works like a blanket. Keeps heat in during winter, keeps heat out during summer." Hicks shook his head and returned to his woodpile. Across the settlement clearing, Thomas Whitmore looked up from his surveying equipment. The older man had heard the exchange and found himself troubled by the structural implications. A second roof meant additional weight, bearing down on wall timbers and foundation logs. It meant more surface area to catch wind. It meant complexity, where simplicity had always served frontier builders well. But Whitmore kept his concerns professional rather than personal. The boy would learn soon enough that mountain building followed proven methods for good reason. By late September, Elijah's design had drawn the attention of Reverend James Caldwell, who served as the settlement's informal leader and voice of community wisdom. Caldwell arrived at the construction site carrying genuine concern for the orphaned boy's safety. What he saw made him remove his hat and scratch his head in confusion. The teenager had erected a complete secondary roof frame 14 in above his primary roof, supported by 47 vertical posts anchored directly into the main roof beams. The outer roof would be covered with rough-hewn oak planks rather than shingles, creating a structure that appeared to serve no purpose except adding weight and complexity to an already functional cabin. Most troubling was the sheer volume of timber. Elijah intended to use over 800 board feet of cut lumber that represented 3 weeks of solo labor in the forest. "Boy's building a hat for his house," Caldwell told Hicks and Whitmore that evening at the settlement's informal gathering. 2 roofs where one serves fine, and enough extra timber to build a second entire cabin. I've counseled him to save that wood for fence posts and furniture, but he's got his father's stubborn streak, God rest his soul. Elijah continued his work, undeterred by the community's concern. Each morning he climbed onto his primary roof and added another section of the secondary structure, working with a patient precision that suggested he was following plans more detailed than his neighbors could perceive. The outer roof frame rose exactly 14 in above the inner roof at every point, maintained by vertical supports positioned to distribute weight evenly across the primary structure. Elijah had calculated that this specific gap would create optimal air circulation during summer while providing maximum insulation value during winter. The mathematics came from his grandfather's journals, written in a mixture of German and English that Elijah had studied since childhood, filled with diagrams and thermal calculations that the old man had learned during his youth in the Swiss Alps. Why do we build the second roof? Elijah asked himself aloud, echoing his grandfather's teaching method while setting the final support posts. Because still air is the best insulator God ever made. 14 in of trapped air holds warmth better than 14 in of solid wood. The outer roof stops wind from stealing that air away. The design required understanding principles that confused every observer. The inner roof covered with tight cedar shingles would provide waterproofing and primary weather protection. The outer roof, covered with overlapping oak planks, would serve as a shield against wind, a first line of defense against snow accumulation, and most importantly, the upper boundary of a 14 inches insulating air cavity that would surround the cabin's entire top surface. The air gap would remain relatively still in calm weather, providing thermal resistance equivalent to 6 in of solid timber. During storms, the outer roof would deflect wind before it could penetrate to the inner structure, maintaining the air gap's insulating properties, even under extreme conditions. Marcus Hicks found himself studying Elijah's progress with professional skepticism that couldn't quite dismiss the boy's confidence. The construction methods violated every principle of efficient frontier building. Where Hicks could roof a standard cabin in 2 days using proven techniques, the Thorn boy had spent 5 weeks on secondary structure work that seemed entirely unnecessary. The additional timber weight concerned Hicks deeply. An estimated 2,400 pounds of lumber added to a roof system that would already bear significant snow loads during mountain winters. I'll grant the boy works hard, Hicks admitted to Whitmore during their weekly assessment of settlement affairs. But he's wasting that effort on a design that can't help and might kill him. That extra weight will bring the whole structure down when real snow accumulates. A double roof means double the collapse risk, and that boy will be sleeping underneath it when it fails. Hicks's practical experience prevented him from considering that Elijah's design might address structural challenges through principles his knowledge had never encountered. The load distribution across 47 support posts, the triangulated bracing that connected outer and inner roof frames, and the deliberate pitch differential that would cause snow to slide from the outer roof before accumulating dangerous weight. These features served purposes that Hendricks couldn't recognize because they solved problems he'd never learned to anticipate. Thomas Whitmore experienced similar professional discomfort. His surveying work had taught him that structural complexity invited failure, but his grandfather had mentioned alpine building techniques that used double wall and double roof construction for thermal efficiency. Whitmore had dismissed these stories as irrelevant to American conditions, assuming that abundant timber made such labor-intensive methods unnecessary. Now he watched the Thorn boy achieve construction results that Whitmore's conventional knowledge couldn't evaluate. November brought the first serious test of Wood County's building methods, and the results began separating theory from performance in ways that surprised even the most confident settlers. Marcus Rice's conventional single-roof cabin, constructed according to 27 years of frontier experience, required constant fire maintenance to keep interior temperatures above 42 degrees during the early cold snaps. By mid-November, Hicks had burned through 5 cords of split oak and hickory, watching his carefully prepared winter fuel supply diminish faster than expected. The cabin's roof radiated heat upward into the cold mountain air, creating thermal losses that no amount of additional firewood could fully overcome. 300 yards up the slope, Elijah Thorn's double-roof cabin demonstrated thermal performance that defied frontier logic. The boy built his evening fires using the same modest fuel loads his neighbors considered barely adequate for an hour's warmth. But where standard cabins lost 40% of their heat through single-layer roofs, Elijah's air gap created insulation that captured and retained warmth with mechanical efficiency. The physics became visible on the coldest November mornings. While every other cabin in the settlement showed frost formations on interior ceiling surfaces, Elijah's ceiling remained dry and relatively warm to the touch. The trapped air between his two roofs maintained a temperature buffer that prevented the dramatic heat loss his neighbors experienced every night. Klaus Baer, a German immigrant who had settled in Haywood County in 1889, noticed it first. Weber had built his cabin using methods his father had taught him in Bavaria, and he recognized something familiar in the Thornboy's approach. Depelled, Baer muttered to himself, using the German term for double roof. The boy builds like the mountain people in the old country. Baer mentioned this observation to Hrix, who dismissed it as immigrant confusion about proper American building methods. But Weber had seen his grandfather's drawings of alpine structures that used air gaps for thermal regulation in climates far harsher than anything Carolina could produce. The physics made sense to Weber, even if the cultural context didn't translate to frontier America. Elijah's double-roof system operated according to principles that mountain dwellers had refined through centuries of adapting to extreme conditions. The 14 inches air gap provided insulation equivalent to 6 in of solid timber, but without the weight or material cost of actual wood. More importantly, the still air trapped between the roofs created a thermal buffer that moderated temperature swings, keeping the cabin cooler during sunny winter days and warmer during frigid nights. By December, the mathematical differences had become undeniable. Elijah had consumed exactly 3 cords of firewood while maintaining interior temperatures that ranged between 58 and 65 degrees. Hrix had burned 9 cords to achieve interior temperatures that averaged 44 degrees on the coldest nights, with his ceiling often showing ice crystals by morning. The contrast troubled every assumption Hendricks had accumulated during his building career. Old Jacob Morrison, who had survived the brutal winter of 1857 that killed 23 people across the Blue Ridge, stopped by Elijah's cabin in late December to examine the double-roof design. Morrison had witnessed how standard construction methods failed during extended periods of extreme cold, and he recognized warning signs in the current weather patterns that suggested a similar test might be approaching. "Weather's got that feel," Morrison told Elijah while studying the secondary roof structure that rose above the primary. "Same kind of pressure drop. Same stillness before the wind. We had storms like that before the killing winter of '57. If we get a blizzard like that one, your strange double roof might be the difference between standing and falling for more structures than just yours." February 3, 1894, arrived with a silence that experienced mountain people recognized as deadly. The morning temperature read 18 degrees below zero on Marcus Hrix's mercury thermometer, and by noon, the wind began building from the northwest with a steady howl that promised catastrophe. Old Jacob Morrison's weather predictions proved devastatingly accurate as the great Appalachian blizzard swept down from the Ohio Valley with the force of a natural disaster, trapping Haywood County in conditions that would not break for 21 consecutive days. The storm's first phase brought 5 feet of snow in 48 hours, driven by winds that exceeded 90 miles per hour at exposed elevations. Visibility dropped to zero as horizontal snow transformed the landscape into a featureless white void where direction and distance lost all meaning. Temperature dropped to 34 degrees below zero during the storm's peak, with wind chill calculations suggesting effective temperatures that could freeze exposed flesh in under 2 minutes. By the 4th day, Marcus Hrix's roof began failing in ways that threatened his family's survival. His conventional single-layer construction, built according to standard frontier practices, groaned under snow loads that exceeded its design capacity. The weight of accumulated snow over 55 pounds per square foot by the 4th night caused visible sagging in roof beams that Hrix had considered adequately sized for any mountain winter. At 3:47 a.m. on February 7, the center beam cracked with a sound like a rifle shot. Hrix barely evacuated his family before the entire roof structure collapsed inward, destroying everything they owned and leaving them homeless in the deadliest blizzard in living memory. Thomas Whitmore faced similar structural failures as his surveyor's cabin proved inadequate for sustained extreme conditions. The horizontal wind drove snow directly against his roof surface, where it accumulated faster than the pitch could shed it. By the fifth day, Whitmore's roof showed cracks in 3 major beams. His family evacuated to a neighboring structure that would itself fail 2 days later. 7 cabins collapsed entirely between February 5 and February 12, their single-layer roofs failing catastrophically under snow loads that exceeded 70 pounds per square foot. The Henderson family lost their infant daughter when their roof fell without warning at midnight. The structural failure was too sudden for escape. The Morrison family cabin held, but old Jacob Morrison died on February 9 from the exertion of constant snow removal. His 73-year-old heart gave out while trying to save his home. Elijah Thorne's double-roof cabin weathered the catastrophe with mechanical reliability that seemed to mock the destruction around it. The outer roof, designed to bear loads far exceeding any possible snow accumulation, showed no stress under weights that destroyed conventional structures. The 14 inches air gap between the 2 roof layers provided not just insulation but structural separation. Snow accumulated on the outer roof, while the inner roof remained completely unburdened, bearing only its own weight and the fixed load of the secondary structure. More critically, the outer roof's steeper pitch, 42 degrees compared to the standard 32 degrees, caused snow to slide before reaching dangerous accumulations. Where Hicks's roof held snow until structural failure, Elijah's outer roof shed its burden in regular avalanches that fell harmlessly to the ground around the cabin. The design created a self-cleaning system that his neighbors' conventional roofs couldn't match. The thermodynamics proved equally decisive. While collapsed cabins exposed their occupants to killing cold, intact cabins struggled to maintain temperatures above freezing. Elijah's double roof insulation kept his interior at 52 degrees with minimal fuel consumption. The air gap that his neighbors had mocked as wasteful complexity now provided survival-level warmth that single-roof structures couldn't achieve even when burning furniture for fuel. Community desperation reached critical levels by February 10 as multiple families faced homelessness and potential death by exposure. Rise had nowhere to shelter his wife and 4 children after his roof collapsed. Whitmore's family had evacuated twice as successive shelter cabins failed. The Patterson family, the Caldwells, and the remnants of 6 households with destroyed or failing structures all faced the reality that their dismissal of the Thorne boys' methods might now cost them their lives. The contrast between survival and crisis became starkly visible across the settlement. While Elijah's cabin stood solid with clear windows and steady smoke from efficient combustion, his neighbors' homes lay crushed under snow or groaned with imminent collapse. The strange double roof that had provoked laughter now represented the only reliable shelter in a settlement fighting for survival. Marcus Rise swallowed 27 years of frontier pride when he fought his way through chest-deep snow to Elijah's door on February 10. His breath formed ice crystals instantly in the -29 degrees air, and his fingers had already lost feeling despite heavy mittens. Behind him, connected by ropes to prevent separation in the blinding snow, came his wife, Catherine, and their 4 children, carrying what blankets they had salvaged from their collapsed home. Elijah! Rise shouted against the howling wind. We need shelter. Our cabin's gone, and we're freezing. Elijah opened his door to reveal an interior so warm that steam rose from the Hicks family's clothing as they stumbled inside. The contrast struck Hicks like a physical blow. His family had spent 3 days in a neighbor's failing cabin, huddling in 28 degrees temperatures while burning their host's furniture. Yet Elijah's 18 by 22-foot space maintained the comfortable warmth of a mild autumn evening. Come in, all of you, Elijah said simply. There's room enough. Thomas Whitmore arrived 5 hours later with his wife and 3 children, his professional pride shattered along with his assumptions about proper mountain construction. The region's surveying authority had been forced to seek shelter from a 17-year-old orphan whose building methods Whitmore had publicly ridiculed. Klaus Bear came next, supporting his elderly mother, whose conventional cabin had lost its roof entirely during the storm's 8th day. Then the Patterson family, the Caldwells, and the surviving Hendersons, still mourning their lost daughter. One by one, survivors of the failing settlement fought their way to Elijah's double-roof refuge. By February 14, Elijah's cabin sheltered 27 people in a space designed for one. Yet, the double-roof structure continued maintaining interior temperatures that never dropped below 48 degrees, even with the added humidity and body heat of desperate refugees. The thermodynamics that made this possible fascinated Hicks despite his desperate circumstances. Elijah used the crisis as an opportunity to demonstrate principles his grandfather's journals had preserved through generations of alpine building knowledge. "Watch the ceiling," Elijah instructed, placing his palm against the interior surface. "Feel how it holds steady. The air between the two roofs works like a wool blanket. Still air doesn't conduct heat, so the warmth from our fire stays inside instead of escaping through the roof." He explained how the outer roof provided protection from wind that would otherwise strip heat from a single-layer structure. "Wind hitting your roof steals warmth directly, but wind hitting my outer roof just makes noise. The air gap stops that cold from reaching inside." Critch studied the construction with the eye of a craftsman recognizing superior technique. "The weight-bearing," he said, tracing the support posts that connected outer and inner roofs. "You distributed the outer roof's load across 47 separate points. Each post carries maybe 50 pounds of structure plus snow load, but together they spread that weight across the whole primary roof." "My grandfather's calculations," Elijah confirmed. He figured the mathematics for roofs in the Swiss mountains, where snow loads reach 100 pounds per square foot every winter. 14 in of air gap, 47 support posts on 4-foot centers, an outer roof pitched at 42 degrees to shed snow before it accumulates. The system handles more weight than Carolina will ever produce. The survival statistics told the story of engineering triumph over conventional assumptions. Elijah's double-roof cabin successfully housed 27 people for 11 days, maintaining temperatures that allowed normal activity while the surface world remained deadly. Conventional cabins in the settlement suffered a 54% roof failure rate, with 7 complete collapses and 6 additional structures requiring evacuation due to imminent failure. Margaret Caldwell gave birth to a healthy son on February 18, delivered in the warm safety of Elijah's cabin while her own home stood roofless and filled with snow. The infant's survival represented more than personal joy. It demonstrated how traditional alpine engineering had provided conditions that conventional American building methods couldn't match under extreme circumstances. Rise later calculated that Elijah's double-roof design had saved at least 23 lives during the crisis, possibly more if the blizzard had continued beyond 21 days. Late February brought the first signs of temperature moderation and the slow work of digging out. Hicks faced the humbling reality that his 27 years of frontier building experience had been fundamentally incomplete. The Thornboy's strange double roof hadn't just proven superior. It had proven essential for survival under conditions that revealed the inadequacy of standard American frontier construction. March brought a sustained thaw to Haywood County, and with it came Marcus Hicks's public acknowledgement that Elijah Thorne's double-roof technique represented superior engineering rather than youthful foolishness. Rise began dismantling what remained of his collapsed cabin on March 12, salvaging usable timber while planning a reconstruction that would follow Elijah's precise specifications. A secondary roof frame positioned 14 in above the primary, 47 support posts on 4-foot centers, an outer pitch of 42 degrees for snow shedding, and over 800 board feet of additional lumber positioned to create the air gap that had meant the difference between life and death. "I thought I knew mountain building," Hicks announced at the settlement's March gathering. "But this boy showed me I was building roofs that couldn't survive real weather. Every cabin I build from now on gets a double roof, and I don't care who laughs at me for it." Hicks's endorsement carried significant weight throughout 4 counties, where his reputation as an experienced builder had influenced dozens of construction projects. The technique spread rapidly through immigrant networks of German, Swiss, and Austrian settlers who recognized in Elijah's methods the double-roof traditions their own ancestors had practiced in the old countries. By late 1894, 19 new structures within 40 miles of Haywood County incorporated Elijah's double-roof design, with construction requests arriving from settlements the young man had never visited. County officials asked Elijah to consult on all future building in vulnerable mountain locations, acknowledging that his methods had prevented multiple deaths during the February catastrophe. The economic impact became measurable by the following winter. Firewood consumption in double-roof cabins averaged 45% lower than conventional structures, representing thousands of cords of timber that families no longer needed to cut, haul, and store. Roof repair costs dropped to nearly zero as the outer roof bore weather damage that would have required constant maintenance on single-layer structures. The labor investment in double-roof construction, approximately 3 additional weeks per cabin, paid for itself within 2 winters through reduced fuel and maintenance costs. Modern building science research conducted by North Carolina State University in 1978 confirmed Elijah's empirical results through controlled testing of reconstructed double-roof designs. Researchers built replica thorn structures using original specifications and materials, measuring thermal performance and structural resilience against period conventional buildings under laboratory conditions. Testing documented 2.4 times greater heating efficiency, consistent temperature advantages of 18 to 24 degrees, and structural load capacity that exceeded single-roof construction by a factor of 3.2. 2 under simulated snow loading. The Appalachian Heritage Foundation maintains records from 11 double-roof structures built using Elijah Thorn specifications between 1894 and 1912, including detailed construction drawings, thermal performance measurements, and fuel consumption data. These records demonstrate that the breathing roof technology achieved energy efficiency through traditional knowledge that anticipated modern insulation principles by over a century. Contemporary passive house construction employs air gap and ventilated roof principles identical to those Elijah applied in 1893. Modern building engineers recognize traditional alpine double roof techniques as sophisticated thermal engineering achieved through generational observation rather than formal calculation. The Thornboy wasteful second roof anticipated by a 100 red years the energy-conscious building methods that contemporary architects consider cutting-edge environmental design. The ultimate vindication of Elijah's methods came through survival statistics that demonstrated the life-saving value of traditional knowledge applied to frontier conditions. The Great Appalachian Blizzard of 1894 killed 58 people across the Blue Ridge Mountains due to structural failures and exposure. But engineering analysis suggests that double-roof construction, had it been widely adopted, could have prevented over 75% of those deaths through superior structural resilience and thermal efficiency. Elijah Thorn's strange second roof hadn't just challenged frontier building assumptions. It had proven that dismissing traditional knowledge as wasteful complexity often reveals not their foolishness, but our Elijah Thorn's strange second roof hadn't just challenged frontier building assumptions, it had exposed a deeper truth. That what people often dismiss as unnecessary, old-fashioned, or foolish is sometimes wisdom refined by generations of survival. The frontier had laughed at complexity because it preferred simplicity. Elijah had listened to the land instead. In the years that followed, his ideas quietly outlived the ridicule. Cabins with breathing roofs stood warmer, stronger, and safer, while others failed under snow and wind. No monument was raised in his name, no textbook credited his insight at the time. Yet his legacy endured in timber and airspace, in lives spared during winters that took so many others. History would eventually catch up, rediscovering what Elijah had already proven with his hands and his patience, that progress does not always come from new inventions, but from paying attention. And that the difference between survival and loss is often found not in louder ideas, but in the ones whispered by experience. The world laughed at Elijah Thorn's second roof. The blizzard answered instead.